Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, February 7th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about last night's Nevada Republican primary results, where the first place winner was absolutely nobody. In last night's Nevada Republican primary, Nikki Haley served to be as the only prominent Republican on the ballot in this election. And yet despite that, over 60% of the statewide Republicans voted against her for an option that is only found and exclusive to Nevada. None of these candidates being somebody that's on the ballot that people can vote for in any type of election. And so looking at the Nevada GOP primary results, you might be wondering, why is Donald Trump not on this ballot? Why is Ron DeSantis or many other Republicans that had entered into the race far before this declaration needed to be done? And the reason for that is because of a statewide law that was put into place by the Democratic legislature here in Nevada, which has a supermajority, so anything they practically say that they want to get done will get done. But the Nevada Democrats here instituted a law that required both parties to hold a primary. They looked to the Iowa caucus, they looked to the 2016 caucuses and said, we don't want to do this anymore. And so they decided to move forward with a primary that would be ran by the state, funded by the state, and parties would be able to allocate delegates based on how the Nevada primary goes. The Democrats were entirely on board, but the Republicans not so much. And so they decided that they would hold a caucus just 2 days after the GOP primary, and the state said, we won't fund it, but we can't stop you. And so the Nevada GOP state party, made an ultimatum to candidates that if you were to sign up for a Nevada primary, you could not vote in the caucus, you could not run in the caucus. And so Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and many other contenders said, I want to go where the delegates are. I want to go to the caucus. I don't want to go to the primary. Nikki Haley's team opted to go with the primary. And there's a lot of political calculus around it that we will talk about a little bit later on in this video. But the headline that is the main takeaway from last night's election is that Nikki Haley lost to nobody. And so in this race, like I said, Nevada has this very, very unique option for voters where they can vote for none of these candidates. It's really only meant to exist when there is no leading contender and the opposite side of the aisle would rather vote for this and just allow this to move forward to a general election without anybody at the top of the ticket or anybody nominated from their end. But this time it was different. It isn't that Republicans want Joe Biden to be reelected or that they don't want a Republican. It's that their Republican, Donald Trump, was simply not on the ballot. And so when they went to go to the voting booth and they realized that Donald Trump wasn't on the ballot because this caucus and primary debacle isn't known to the average voter in this state, their option was Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, and a bunch of no-name candidates, or they could have chosen none of these candidates. And that's exactly what they did. And so looking at these results, I think it goes to show just the extent of the Republican Party's dislike of Nikki Haley and unwillingness to elect her and nominate her to the GOP nomination. This comes as a result after the Iowa caucuses when she lost to Donald Trump, with just 19% of the vote coming in third place between her, Governor DeSantis, and President Trump. Fast forward to New Hampshire, where she lost to Donald Trump by double digits, and then now moving into the Nevada Republican primary, where she gets just around 31% of the vote, despite being the only mainstream Republican contender that's still in the race that was on the ballot in this election. And so I think this was a complete and total rejection of Nikki Haley as a candidate here, but it didn't exactly work in the way that she expected it to, especially when it came down to how she registered in the first place. I told you the whole drama and the situation around registering for the primary or the caucus, but her calculus here was that winning the Republican primary in Nevada would be a big enough headline that it would allow her moving into South Carolina to have more momentum and more energy around her campaign. But in fact, this had the exact opposite effect. If this was a state like New Hampshire, and she was the only one on the primary ballot, but Donald Trump was on the caucus ballot, she would have won the primary. Because in this race, people maybe could have voted in candidates, but more often than not, they're not going to vote for none of these candidates, especially if it didn't exist. The difference here in Nevada is that it has to exist. It exists on presidential ballots, Senate ballots, governor ballots. It's everywhere in the state, and is never really used to this extent, but in this time, it absolutely was. And so seeing that the none of these candidates election was taken away, all of the major headlines were quite embarrassing for Nikki Haley. In fact, the New York Times reported that Haley was outvoted in the Nevada primary by none of these candidates without Trump on the ballot. Headline after headline, projection after projection. When the mainstream media has to make a projection that in the Nevada Republican primary that none of these candidates wins the race over Nikki Haley, it calls into question does she even have a chance at winning the nomination, even if Trump himself is off the ballot? Because in a situation like this, the voters clearly reject her. Even when they are practically forced to choose her, they find a way not to. And even in a race where Donald Trump isn't on the ballot, you still found that voters out there who turned out to vote, who may not have been, pushed to vote by Donald Trump because his campaign has been focusing on that caucus, not the primary, just handed her a resounding, embarrassing defeat. And that's what the takeaway is from this. And so when I see this coming after New Hampshire, coming after Iowa, in Iowa, the Haley campaign promised us she was going to come in second. She came in third. In New Hampshire early on, the Nikki Haley campaign promised us that she would come well within striking distance, that she might actually win New Hampshire. She held over 100 events in the state. Trump held 20. There's no chance that he beats her. He did, by a lot. And then you fast forward to Nevada, where there was a promise here and a hope here that Nikki Haley might actually win her first primary. In fact, she lost, with an overwhelming majority of voters choosing none of these candidates. And so when I look back to 2016, it doesn't even match what we saw in the past when it came down to the GOP caucuses, the Democratic caucuses. You found here that Donald Trump got around 45.9% of the vote. Nikki Haley is on par with where Marco Rubio was, but the combined vote share of Rubio and Cruz is well above what Nikki Haley got in 2024. It means that the party dynamic in Nevada has shifted quite tremendously, and even in a race where Donald Trump isn't on the ballot, he somehow still comes out ahead. Because I'm sure there were voters here that in the caucus will choose Trump, but voted for Nikki Haley because she was the only recognizable name on the ballot. But there were plenty of people, the majority of people, that chose to rank none of these candidates over the options that they were given. Because they don't like Nikki Haley. They don't like Mike Pence. They don't like Tim Scott. But they love Donald Trump. And so that means, even in this situation, not voting for anybody at all, despite voting in the election. And so I think this really now is going to do some damage to Nikki Haley in terms of validity for her campaign. She needed this victory in the Nevada Republican primary. I think the way I saw it was that it could only be a glimmer of, revitalization for her campaign if she was to win the Nevada primary, that it would give a little bit more emphasis to her campaign, but it would still eventually fizzle out and she would still lose the primary to Donald Trump. But this, again, choosing to do the political move, the political strategy move of just running in the primary when no one else wanted to in the hopes that you would win it and then losing to nobody as well, really, really, really backfires. And I think it has done her so much of a disservice that all of these headlines and the major takeaways now are not that Nikki Haley came in first place as a candidate, but that she came in second place again to nobody. And that she was outvoted by an option to choose no one on the ballot than people who were excited to pick her in the first place. It is an embarrassment, if you ask me. And you know what's right around the corner? The Republican primary in South Carolina. At the end of this month, we will see Nikki Haley's home state, which is slated to give Donald Trump a resounding victory over her in the most recent poll from Morning Consult by 37 points. With an average lead for Donald Trump of 31 points to Nikki Haley's advantage here, you find that the Nevada Republican primary in South Carolina will be a bloodbath for Nikki Haley in her own home state, in which she served as a governor from, which is so fascinating. And so I think looking at the GOP primaries that are coming up, looking at where we are with the Republicans on South Carolina, where Republicans are coming up in other states too. Michigan, we will see. We will see a bunch of states on Super Tuesday if Nikki Haley makes it out that long. Nothing is giving her any reason to stay in the race, and nothing is indicating that she should, right? There is no major state coming up where she's going to have a major breakthrough. First, it was Iowa. Then it was New Hampshire. Then it was Nevada. And now it's her own home state that's going to turn their backs on her. That is where we are. The Republicans are not in a good place with Nikki Haley, but are in a great place with Donald Trump. And that is the problem. And so I look at this and say the Republican Party has a huge issue here where they love Donald Trump, they hate Nikki Haley, and so it's a problem for the general election because of what we are seeing come out of mainstream election polls. I'm making a video a little bit later today or tomorrow, haven't decided yet, about the state of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin, we just saw a poll released that shows Donald Trump and Joe Biden in a tie. In a head-to-head race, Marquette University finds that it is a tie between Trump and Biden. Now, to me, that's good news for Biden, at least for right now, because poll after poll after poll in many other swing states show him losing. In fact, in Wisconsin, plenty of polls a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I remember, were coming in with Trump up by 5, by 6. And so narrowing it down to a tie is showing a change in some of these Rust Belt states. But you know who didn't see much of a change? Nikki Haley, who right now is performing significantly better than Donald Trump did against Joe Biden. When it came down to leaners who were forced to make a choice, Trump and Biden came in at equal. But Nikki Haley, on the same answer, you find that Nikki Haley, head-to-head with Joe Biden, beats him 57-41. That difference there, that is a swing, a significant swing on the overall net lead for Nikki Haley of 16 points. The same electorate here that chooses Trump and Biden at an equal rate, 49% of respondents choose Biden over Trump, 57% choose Haley over Biden. Just 41% are willing to say that they commit to voting for Joe Biden against Nikki Haley. And so when I see that, I'm looking at this from the perspective of an election analyst and somebody who's trying to look at it from the standpoint of who's the most electable, who's going to win, who could make it to the general election and actually win the general election. I think Nikki Haley could win the general election. I don't think she makes it there. And I think you are seeing the problem that the GOP has in many other states too, where they may be choosing the person that resonates the most with their base. But very clearly there is a disconnect between who the base can win over, or who can win over the base, and who can win a general election. Because Trump has a chance, but Haley is nearly guaranteed. And that is the fundamental difference between the two. I think at the end of the day, though, the voters on the national level, on the South Carolina level, and the voters that have already voted in Nevada, Iowa, New Hampshire have made it known they want Donald Trump to be the nominee in 2024. And so partially, and part of me is perplexed by the fact that Nikki Haley has stayed in the race so long, but I think at this point in time, she has nothing left to lose. She seems to be letting a lot more loose when it comes down to the attacks on Donald Trump. She is giving the Biden campaign arguably a lot more ammunition than she was previously. And so I think on that end, that is something that Democrats are happy about, that Biden's campaign is happy about. Republicans, not so much. But at some point in time, based on these numbers and based on her results, the performance is only going to get worse. At first, it was third in Iowa. Then she did very well in New Hampshire and contrary, but underperformed expectations. Demolished in Nevada, soon to be demolished in her own home state. And again, the national numbers aren't doing that much better either. Nikki Haley getting a roughly 18% of the vote to Donald Trump's 75%. And so really, there is no pathway forward for anybody besides Donald Trump. And that is the problem that the GOP faces, because arguably, he's one of the weaker Republicans that could be the nominee. But that is their decision to make. And so as we look ahead to the future of this election, as we get closer and closer to the general election that has practically already begun, because we know it's going to be Trump, we know it's going to be Biden, it's starting up now. I think we are getting to a point where this general election season is going to feel a lot longer, a lot more tumultuous, because it will be. Right now, I think Republicans also, too, are in a similar dilemma that Democrats are in. On one hand, Democrats know that if they were to nominate somebody besides President Biden, maybe they could have a higher electoral chance. Republicans also equally know that they may have a higher electoral chance with Nikki Haley. They don't ignore the numbers, but I don't think they care. On other sides of the aisle, both sides, you find that Democrats consistently want Biden. The Nevada Republican primary was not the only interesting takeaway here. Joe Biden got 90% of the vote. In South Carolina, there was a primary there that you saw that Joe Biden got 96% of the vote. When it came down to New Hampshire, Joe Biden won a write-in campaign where the Biden campaign didn't even spend a single dollar in the state and refused to even acknowledge its existence. They went on a first-in-the-nation campaign in South Carolina, while Democrats in New Hampshire were willing to write him into this race and give him a landslide victory. Both sides of the aisle want candidates who maybe we could see better alternatives. But we are 1,000% in for a rematch, and it looks like nobody, not Nikki Haley, not anyone, is going to stop that. And so where we are today is Trump versus Biden. This very poor showing from Nikki Haley in the GOP primary in Nevada is quite embarrassing. And I think it is the start to the end of her presidential campaign that seemed to be very long-lived, but in reality had a very short-lived chance at victory, and honestly speaking, probably never had a chance at victory in this state of the GOP. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already. Check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.